All right, so with our second part in our ethics and culture unit, we're going to talk about culture, ethnicity, and race. And first, I do just want to preface with some of this stuff can bring up some internal feelings or discomfort or things that we just may not realize that's sitting inside of us. So, as we talk about it and as we go through these, please just make sure that you're respectful to yourself, to your classmates, to other people's feelings, and making sure if there are any of those uncomfortable feelings that we're recognizing them, talking about them, and understanding where they might be coming from. As we know, we've talked about this before, but as a healthcare worker, you have to work with people of all different kinds, all different races, cultures, ages, socioeconomic status, gender, everything. So we need to make sure that we're looking at each person as an individual. There are going to be lots of different things that make all of us unique people, whether that's our physical characteristics, our family life, our socioeconomic status, our religious beliefs, the geographical location where we are, the education and occupation that we hold, or just general life experiences. One of the big things that's going to influence a lot of these different factors is our culture or perhaps our ethnic heritage. So, culture by definition is the values, beliefs, attitudes, languages, symbols, rituals, behaviors, and customs that are unique to a group of people. We've talked about this in the past, but we know it's passed on from generation to generation. We tend to look at it as a set of rules for that particular group, and it gives us or an individual kind of a blueprint or a general way of understanding how we live or how we act and behave within that group. When we look at things that are influenced by culture, this can be anything from our family relations, our child rearing, so how our kids raised, education or education expectations, your occupation choice, social interactions, your spirituality and religious beliefs, which are not the same, and we'll talk about that, our food preferences, our health beliefs, and then how and when we utilize healthcare. So, some of the things, just the basic concepts we want to make sure we understand about culture. It is learned behavior. So, remember, kids learn by imitating adults. If you've ever been around a small child, they are like little sponges that want to repeat everything that you do. So, this is not something that you just automatically walk into a group and understand what that group culture is. It has to be taught to you by other people. Culture is shared within that group of people that have those same practices and beliefs, and it's social. So, everybody in our group understands what's appropriate behavior that's passed down from generations past based on our traditions. And then the last thing, culture is dynamic, it's always changing. So we're going to be developing new ideas that might help change the standard of behavior. And then again, it tells the group how we meet our needs by adapting to our environmental change. So that's culture. Now, when we look at ethnicity, this is when we've classified people based on their national origin, which is sometimes the same as their culture. So here with ethnicity, we have a common heritage, national origin, social customs, language, and beliefs. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that every person in an ethnic group may not practice all of the same beliefs, but they're still influenced by other members of their ethnic group. I'm not going to read all of these to you, but they're here for your reference. When we look at ethnic groups in the United States and then some of their countries of origin, we have, for instance, our African American culture or ethnic group is going to potentially have originated from Central and South African countries, the Dominican Republic, Haiti, and Jamaica. Our Asian or Pacific American ethnicity is going to have come likely from Australia, Cambodia, China, Guam, Hawaii, India, Indonesia, etc. And you'll see that for a lot of these ethnic groups and countries of origin, there are a lot of different areas where we might see people of similar ethnicity originate from. So, that said, we do need to make sure we understand that within ethnic groups, there's lots of different subgroups. So, for instance, both a German and Italian are considered European American, but they have very different languages and lifestyles. If I put a group of German originated folks and a group of Italian originated folks together in a room, they're not necessarily going to have a ton in common, but they both originate from the same area. And then the last thing we're going to talk about is race. So, race is where we're classifying people based on what they look like. So, their physical or biological characteristics. This tends to be, when we look at it, more of skin color, but it could also include their hair and eyes, their facial features, their blood type, their bone structure. And unfortunately, we do see this often used as a way to label a group of people and explain their patterns of behavior. But we have to remember that since race is just simply physical characteristics, it's going to cut across a lot of different ethnic and cultural groups. So just because someone has the same skin color or skin tone as someone else doesn't mean that they have the same ethnicity or cultural values. And remember, our culture or ethnicity is where we get our values, beliefs, and behavior. So we can't interlump those with race because they're not the same thing. So, for instance, just like we said, someone who is Black from Africa or someone who is Black from the Caribbean may have similar physical characteristics, but they have very different ethnic backgrounds and different cultural beliefs. We're going to see that there's different races present in a lot of our ethnic groups. So we'll see white and Black Hispanics, white Africans and Caribbeans, and white and Black Asians. So again, we have to make sure that we're not lumping a behavior or a stereotype about someone's ethnicity into a cultural group, or about their race into a cultural group. So now, with all of that in the back of our minds, we're going to look at cultural diversity. So this is when we recognize those differences among people that are a result of our cultural, ethnic, and racial factors. We can't deny that our culture, ethnicity, and our race are going to influence how we behave, our self-perception, our judgment of other people, and our interpersonal relationships. We always have to remember that people in groups are not clones. So there's still going to be differences within our ethnic and cultural groups and in individuals within that single group. You may have heard that the United States has been called a melting pot. This is a term that people have kind of come up with to use as a way to represent the absorption of other cultures into the dominant culture, otherwise known as cultural assimilation. But to do this, those other cultural groups have to change their beliefs and behaviors and then adopt the beliefs of the dominant culture, which would be the United States or American culture, if you will. However, when we look at it, that's not what happens. So think about it as like when you look at a melting pot. If I throw a bunch of cheese into a hot pan, all the cheeses are going to melt together. They're going to kind of take on the properties of each other. They're going to lose their individual identities. Whereas when we look at what the United States is, it's really more of a salad bowl. So we're able to see those cultural differences. They're appreciated, they're respected, and they maintain their individuality. So they may start to sort of take on some of the beliefs or actions or thoughts of the dominant culture, but they don't lose their individuality. So just like a salad, if I throw lettuce and tomatoes and carrots into a bowl, they all keep their individual properties, but they mesh well together and work well together to become a unified meal. So another concept is acculturation. So this is when someone has learned the beliefs and behaviors of a dominant culture and they start to assume or take on some of those characteristics. This is not something that happens quickly. It's going to take a long period of time, usually a couple years. So, for instance, if someone or a family immigrates to the United States, that first generation person who has come to the United States is more likely to use their native language from wherever they immigrated from and their behavior patterns. Now, in 2 or 3 generations, we may see that excuse me, that they're more likely to use English as their primary language and follow some of those typical patterns of behavior that we see in the US versus their culture and patterns from their country of origin. Now, when we look at how this plays into healthcare, so we see, like we've said over and over again, lots of different culturally diverse patients. No one is 100% anything. If we all did DNA tests, we're not 100% of anything. We're all a mix mash. So we're always going to have new and changing values and beliefs. So it's important that we be culturally sensitive. And there are in some cultures where it's not acceptable to call an adult by their first name. So we want to always address them by their last name until they've told us to call them something else. One thing we have to remember is that bias, prejudice, and stereotyping can interfere with the acceptance of cultural diversity. We're going to get big into this in our next unit, but I want you to keep in the back of your mind that any sort of bias, prejudice, or stereotype is going to hinder your ability to start accepting and recognizing that there is diversity of culture in our general lifestyle and our way of life. So that's it for today. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I will see you next time.